One world. The goal of this article is that the reader, and particularly the American reader, will get the point that the United Nations Marxist Agenda 2030 has been embedded in, and is operational in most every nation in the world, and thanks to Presidents Bill Clinton and George Bush, the I.C.L.E.I., formerly known as the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, has operations embedded in over 250 known American cities and local and state governments, including the U.S. federal government, promoting the Marxist agenda, goals and initiatives of the United Nations Agenda 2030. Many of the goals of the United Nations Agenda 2030, being promoted through the World Economic Forum, are good-sounding and seemingly well-intentioned. The problem is deception. They are masking their ideology, their methodology and their endgame intentions, which are purely communist-Marxist. I trust and hope you can grasp the magnitude of what has happened over the last 76 years in America and around the world, the establishment of the long-anticipated and prophesied one world government. Also see gotquestions.org and the End Time Prophecy Report. Hydra of Lerna. Hydra was a mythical gigantic, nine-headed water serpent in Greek and Roman mythology which haunted the swamps of Lerna. Heracles was sent to destroy her as one of his 12 labors, but for each of her heads that he decapitated, 2 more sprang forth. Its lair was the Lake of Lerna, was reputed to be an entrance to the underworld. The Hydra had many parallels in ancient Near Eastern religions. So it is with the United Nations organization and all the affiliated entities, which makes for a stranger-than-truth parallel to the mythological Hydra. I would be remiss if I did not also mention the odd similarity between the United Nations structure and its perverse nature when contrasted to a Bible verse from 1 Corinthians 12:12, "For just as the body is one and yet has many parts, and all the parts of the body, though they are many, are one body, so also is Christ." Recognizing that the United Nations is employing socialist Marxist tactics, methodologies and ideologies which advocates for the eradication of Christianity or a transformation into a godless atheism that worships the state. Karl Marx, for example, stated that Christianity preaches cowardice, self-contempt, abasement, submission, humility. The social principles of Christianity are hypocritical, and that communism begins precisely where atheism begins. Communist-Marxist atheism embodies the spirit of Antichrist, which is a counterfeit and antithesis of Christianity. Communism and Marxism cannot coexist with Christianity. So it is with the 1. The American Democrat Party. 2. Saul Alinsky and his book, Rules for Radicals. 3. Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. 4. U.S. Sustainable Development Goals. 5. The Communist Constitution and Program 2015 and 6. The United Nations Agenda 2030. 7. The World Economic Forum. All these are programs and organizations have been developed using methods from Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals and were created with the same ideologies of communism and its variants, such as socialism, Marxism, Leninism, and globalism, all organized under or through the United Nations. Another way of viewing this is that the American Democrat Party has the same objectives, the same ideologies and uses the same methods as the Rules for Radicals. Likewise, Alinsky's Rules for Radicals has the same objectives, the same ideologies and uses the same methods as Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And so goes for the U.S. Sustainable Goals, the Communist Constitution and Program 2015, the United Nations Agenda 2030 and the World Economic Forum. They all have the same objectives, the same ideologies and employ the same methods. For just as the body is one and yet has many parts, and all the parts of the body, though they are many, are one body. Or, perhaps a better description is it is one body with many tentacles. Identical in their plans, programs and purposes, these entities are working in concert, professing and practicing socialist Marxist utopian goals. They are simply agents for the globalist Marxist agenda and a means to restrict your personal freedoms, and to gain absolute control over international financial systems, educational systems, healthcare, food production and environmental controls. Here are some detailed examples of several of these entities' objectives, ideologies and methods. Example number 1. The methods used by radical leftists as taught in Saul Alinsky's book, are demonstrably and ostensibly used by the American Democrat Party, by Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, within the U.S. Sustainable Development Goals, within the Communist Constitution and Program 2015, by the United Nations Agenda 2030 and by the World Economic Forum. Here is a list of the 12 rules for radicals from Alinsky's book. Rule number 1. Power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. Power is derived from 2 main sources, money and people. Have-nots must build power from flesh and blood. Rule number 2. Never go outside the expertise of your people. It results in confusion, fear, and retreat. Feeling secure adds to the backbone of anyone. Rule number 3. Whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. Look for ways to increase insecurity, anxiety, and uncertainty. Rule number 4. Make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. If the rule is that every letter gets a reply, send 30,000 letters. You can kill them with this because no one can possibly obey all of their own rules. Rule number 5. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There is no defense. It's irrational. It's infuriating. It also works as a key pressure point to force the enemy into concessions. Rule number 6. A good tactic is one your people enjoy. They'll keep doing it without urging and come back to do more. They're doing their thing, and will even suggest better ones. Rule number 7. A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag. Don't become old news. Rule number 8. Keep the pressure on. Never let up. Keep trying new things to keep the opposition off balance. As the opposition masters one approach, hit them from the flank with something new. Rule number 9. The threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself. Imagination and ego can dream up many more consequences than any activist. Rule number 10. The major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure upon the opposition. It is this unceasing pressure that results in the reactions from the opposition that are essential for the success of the campaign. If you push a negative hard enough, it will push through and become a positive. Rule number 11. The price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. Never let the enemy score points because you're caught without a solution to the problem. 12. Pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Cut off the support network and isolate the target from sympathy. Go after people and not institutions. People hurt faster than institutions. Example number 2, the United Nations Agenda 2030 Sustainable Goals, see chart link, has the same principles and goals as the American Democrat Party, as Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, as the U.S. Sustainable Development Goals, as the Communist Constitution and Program 2015, and the World Economic Forum, and uses the methods of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. From the United Nations website UNESCO. Example number 3, the list of the World Economic Forum's objectives, principles and goals has the same principles and goals as the American Democrat Party, Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, the U.S. Sustainable Development Goals, the Communist Constitution and Program 2015, the United Nations Agenda 2030, and uses the methods of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. The list includes 1. Biodiversity. 2. Climate change. 3. COVID-19. 4. Economic progress. 5. Future of food. 6. Future of the environment. 7. Gender inequality. 8. Global governance. 9. Governance for sustainability. 10. Humanitarian action. 11. Restoring ocean life. 12. Risk and resilience. Example number 4, the list and graphics for the U.S. national statistics for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, graphics below, demonstrates the same principles and goals as the American Democrat Party, and as Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, the Communist Constitution and Program 2015, the United Nations Agenda 2030, and the World Economic Forum, and uses the methods of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. This is an official website of the United States government. Reporting status. About. Guidance. FAQ. U.S. national statistics for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Click on each goal in the graphics below to search for corresponding U.S. statistics for UN Sustainable Development Goal global indicators. Example number 5, a table of contents from Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, demonstrates the same principles and goals as the American Democrat Party, the U.S. Sustainable Development Goals, the Communist Constitution and Program 2015, the United Nations Agenda 2030, and the World Economic Forum, and uses the methods of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. Title I, Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry. Title II, Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Title III, Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs. Title IV, Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. Title V, Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. Title VI, Committee on Environment and Public Works. Title VII, Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. Title VIII, Committee on Veterans Affairs Title IX, Committee on Finance Title X, Committee on Foreign Relations Title 11, Committee on Indian Affairs. The inescapable conclusion for anyone who will take the time to see the truth and read the facts: Marxism through the Democrat Party and the United Nations has seized the United States government from within. A quote from the Communist Party USA program documents: "The great wealth of the U.S. will for the first time be used to benefit all people." The first Director General of the UN, Julian Huxley, in 1946, said, "The task before the United Nations educational, scientific and cultural organization is the emergence of a single world culture by transferring full sovereignty from separate nations to a world organization. This new world order will be a socialist, authoritarian global government and court with global rule of law and a one-world economy, according to the Commission for Global Governance." The Obama administration, 2009 to 2017, provided a living example of leftist globalists in action. Bankrolled by billionaire George Soros, and using the radical social manipulation rules of Obama's mentor, Saul Alinsky, the left exploits groups like Black Lives Matter as agents of change to help usher in their new world order. They funded and directed radical groups to sow chaos and division by politicizing leftist targets such as police by labeling them as racist. The black community is in a grave situation and they are being exploited and manipulated by the liberal left, said African-American Vanderbilt University law professor Carol Swain. In the same way, UN globalists manipulate the Palestinians. They play the racism card to incite chaos, division and attacks against Israeli police and soldiers, just like in Ferguson, Missouri. Their strategy: foment societal disruption so as to undermine democratic foundations, then step in and take over. The globalist agenda also includes the establishment of a one-world religion, which means the political globalists have a religious arm. The UN is riddled with New Agers, occultists and others who consider freedom of religion hostile to New Age global harmony. Taken from the Jerusalem Post. I trust and hope that you, the reader, and particularly the American reader, have gotten the point here, that the United Nations Marxist Agenda 2030 is embedded in and is operational in most every nation in the world, and thanks to Presidents Bill Clinton and George Bush, the I.C.L.E.I., formerly known as the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, has operations embedded in over 250 American cities and in local and state governments, as well as the U.S. federal government, promoting the agenda, goals and initiatives of the United Nations Agenda 2030 of global Marxism. Hence, the name change of the United Nations Agenda 21, meaning their objectives were to be completed by the 21st century, to Agenda 2030, meaning their main objectives will have been completed by the year 2030. I trust and hope you can grasp the magnitude of what has happened over the last 76 years and is now happening in America and around the world. This may be the establishment of the long-anticipated and prophesied one world government. What now? There are two major obstacles the globalists must still overcome, which are the United States government and Christianity. It appears that, as of the writing of this article, April 15, 2022, the United States has been sufficiently transformed into a socialist system that the globalist can turn their full attention to subversion of Christianity. This leaves Christianity and the gospel of Jesus Christ as the final major barrier between a free world and a godless socialist Marxist one-world government, and the Church has been under a relentless attack from within and from without for decades, and has either been replaced by institutions of religious humanism, falsely using the name of the Christian Church, or is being transformed into a religious ecclesiastical hierarchy void of the Christian gospel by forces inside the Church, at an alarming rate. The Church in America and around the world is in a serious state of decay and apostasy. This, according to the Bible, is a sign of the fifth tribulation seal. The next great event to occur is the breaking of the sixth tribulation seal, the rapture and tribulation such as the world has never seen, the great and terrible day of the Lord. A one-world church is emerging that is antithetical to the God of Christians and Jews and to the Christ of the Bible. See, the one-world church and the false church emerges. Someplace along the way, over the last 2,000 years, it seems that many of the people calling themselves Christians have come to assume that Jesus was either some kind of a progressive left-wing ideologue or a pacifist and have modeled their lives as such. Let's be crystal clear, both assumptions are wrong. Dead wrong. Unfortunately, much of the current-day church leadership in America has bought into the leftist propaganda that the church should stay out of politics. The problem with that assertion is twofold. Number one. This has created confusion within the church regarding its mission and methods. The mission and methods of Jesus were never political, but they were both clear and confrontational. Jesus said, "For this purpose I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance in these last days. to testify to the truth. In John 18:37, therefore Pilate said to him, So you are a king? Jesus answered, You say correctly that I am a king. For this purpose I have been born, and for this I have come into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance in these last days. To bring a sword. In Matthew 10:34, Jesus said, Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Verse 35 For I came to turn a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Verse 36 And a person's enemies will be the members of his household. This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance in these last days. To fulfill the law. In Matthew 5:17, Jesus said, Do not presume that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill the law and the prophets. This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance in these last days. To call sinners. Mark 2:17 says, And hearing this, Jesus said to them, It is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. This, too, is our calling in these last days. To save the world. In John 12:47, Jesus says, If anyone hears my teachings and does not keep them, I do not judge him, for I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. In a very real sense, this, too, is our calling and our method of resistance in these last days, by lifting the name of Jesus, telling others and leading them to him. To cast fire and bring division upon the earth. In Luke 12:49, Jesus says, I have come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. Verse 50 But I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is accomplished. Verse 51 Do you think that I came to provide peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather to create division. This, too, is our calling and our method of resistance in these last days. Number 2. The Church through the teachings of the Bible explains and defines politics. It is true that the Church should not become political, nor should it let the contemporary politics influence or become the message of the Church. The gospel of Jesus Christ, His life, His teachings, His work of salvation by His death and His resurrection are the core message of the Bible and the Church. But when the gospel is correctly understood and the life and message of Jesus is correctly lived out with conviction, politics are defined within the framework of the Judeo-Christian ethos. Also see the American Civil War is over Judeo-Christian values. What He really meant. In John 14:12, Jesus says, Truly, truly I say to you, the one who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also, and greater works than these he will do, because I am going to the Father. Verse 13. And whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. Verse 14. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. I have heard so many preachers and Bible teachers try to justify or explain away these words of Jesus because they just cannot fathom the gentle and sweet dashboard Jesus saying such things as we find in the verses cited. These same confused preachers really get tied in a knot over John 14:12. They will begin their commentary of teaching it with, what this really means is. Jesus said what he meant and meant exactly what he said. We need to get over it and get on with it. Jesus always taught the will of his Father, then demonstrated what he taught. He expects us to do the same. Ephesians, chapter 6, gives us a clear teaching and picture of the type of preparation and resolve we are to assume. Stand firm. Ephesians 6:10-17, Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God, so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God, so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Stand firm therefore, having girded your loins with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace, in addition to all, taking up the shield of faith with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. And take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Your brother and friend, Mike Young. P.S. Let's please remember that God takes no pleasure in those who shrink back. Let's boldly advance the message of the gospel and speak the truth in the face of the opposition. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God and he will draw near to you. More reading on these matters: Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Karl Marx and the United Nations. The Biden sellout of America. Explosive new documents emerge.